I will begin this video with references to some terms we might want to know from this poem. So the word nymph isn't used in the poem, but I can't help but think that Salome is she's being likened to a nymph. We find her in the water. A nymph is a mythological spirit of nature imagined as a beautiful maiden inhabiting rivers, woods, or other locations. So she's being associated with water. I bring that word up because if we examine the name Cleanthe, we see that Cleanthe is a boy's name meaning clean, pure. Now, I can't help but think this is being used ironically in the poem, but nevertheless, we will return to our poem with those ideas in mind. So, let's see. I'll start with, hung our cat with a bootlace from a crooked fence post. Knew he pulled on the cat's hind legs, a smile on his face, and it wouldn't be long before he would join her in the creek, and they'd hold each other, like Siamese twins at the state fair, swimmers trapped under a tyranny of roots, born with one heart. So, we see that maybe it's based on observation from the past, but the speaker knows that her brother is going to show up and they're going to have this kind of incestuous encounter, right? So some of the images that we have in these remaining lines, he would join her in the creek, we imagine, and they'd hold each other like Siamese twins at the state fair. Now, I don't know if state fairs are the same, even like county fairs. I don't know if they're similar to how they were when I was a kid, but I remember going to the county fair and seeing all kinds of oddities floating in jars, okay, like pigs with two heads and just bizarre things like that. And fairs are known for exhibiting these kinds of, anomalies. But even more so, I think that was the case back in the 50s. So, people didn't have the understanding necessarily that we do now about what are called Siamese twins, or we actually call them conjoined twins. But, they're joined. Sometimes to a greater or lesser degree. I mean, it really depends on, it's like a case-by-case basis. But sometimes twins can share organs. Sometimes not. Sometimes they can be separated easily. Sometimes they can't be separated. Like if they were separated, one of them would die. So the impression that this image gives is that they're together. They're like a part of each other. Swimmers trapped under a tyranny of roots. What do we think of when we think of the word roots? I probably more readily think of origins or foundation, So tyranny means an oppressive power, something that is held over you, right? You can't get out from under it. So they are under a tyranny of roots. They're under whatever that means. They're under the tyranny of their family connection, tyranny of, that's probably the best way of putting it. They're under the tyranny of the fact that they're related. They're in love with each other, I suppose. But that will never be approved of because their romance will never be approved of because they're brother and sister. So, swimmers trapped under a tyranny of roots, born with one heart. So the idea that it doesn't matter how they're separated, it doesn't matter that there's a distance between them, they're born with one heart. Now, heart also carries a lot of meaning as a word, right? So heart can mean like your sentiment, your feeling, if we're thinking about it not literally. Right, so they share a heart. Now, if Cleanthe is described as someone who enjoyed torturing and I guess killing the speaker's cat, then how are we to, as readers, how are we to look at Salome? Nothing about her really is conveyed in the poem except, a bit about her behavior, the fact that she's skinny dipping in this creek and 100 yards away people are being baptized. But aside from that, we don't know much about her except the physical description of her. So I'm going to pause here, and in the next video I'll pick up some information about her name, and then we'll talk about other elements of the poem.